Hi, I'm Adam Feinberg, and you're listening to Harlem Stories, and I'm here today with my co-host, Mark Becker.
Hey, Adam. Happy to be here.
Thanks. So, as we've, discussed in other episodes, we are now a bi-weekly listenership. Want to give you some great and interesting stories, to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about the buildings of City College and, just how awesome some of these buildings are. I think we can, discuss, multiple aspects of it, but I think it's one of those things that, I'm hoping this episode will kind of encourage people to go out and visit the sites, because they're just so incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I love to ride a bicycle around the city, and one of my favorite parts of riding uptown is hitting that area around 137 and seeing the beautiful architecture around City College.
Yeah, and there's some interesting aspects of these particular buildings. One, and most people don't realize it, is New York was as hyper local as you could get. When you look at these beautiful stone buildings that were built as part of the City College campus, you have to wonder, where was the stone quarried? We already know that like much of New York's brownstone was quarried, in Connecticut, not too far away from New York City, but back in the 1860s, that was kind of far off. That wasn't exactly around the corner. However, the difference is with City College, the stone that was used, ironically, that was reclaimed stone as a result of the excavation for the New York City subway system. So, we were ahead of the curve in today's when we talk about, sourcing locally. I don't think you could get more local than that.
That's right.
So, I think that's certainly one aspect of, what's interesting about, the buildings of City College. And ultimately, City College was one of these interesting, and we'll have more stories on City College as well. But, just the long and short of it, this wound up becoming originally the Free Academy, which became City College, and was created to provide the poor and immigrant population a chance to have free higher education based on academic merit alone. Now, while that was the original intent, later it was, organized, to be, one of the starting points for the CUNY system, City University of New York. Mm-hmm. So City College was one of the starting points on that. And, while we'll discuss this more in additional episodes, because we're going to focus more here on the actual buildings. But City College, what made it so interesting is, while it evolved from, this free university, it was eventually a, tuition-based school. But the tuition was always intended to be affordable. And as a result of not only the extreme high quality education here is, kids would, submit their applications to, multiple universities, waiting to find out what schools they got into. And if they got into a school as prestigious as Harvard, they'd, typically go back, and their families would go back and say, you know what? I'm not ready to accept Harvard. I actually want to see whether I got into City College.
Wow.
So it was literally that prestigious.
Imagine Harvard being your backup.
Yeah, seriously. Now, today we don't think of it that way, but actually, if you realize the number of prestigious alumni that have graduated from City College, it's a very long list. And in fact, I haven't looked in the last year or so, or maybe it's even going back 2 years, but I can say at least back then, that City College has produced more Nobel laureates than any college or university in the entire nation.
Wow.
So, incredibly prestigious.
Well, a lot of the people running our government went to Harvard, so maybe City College has pulled ahead again.
Well, and Dr. Fauci is an alumni, so he's somebody that I admire, but at the same time, I know he can be controversial, given the COVID vaccine.
Polarizing.
Anyway, to get back to our buildings of City College. College and, getting around. I grew up as a child of the 80s and grew up in the era of Ferris Bueller. And in the immortal words of, of Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Bump, bump.
Exactly. So, that's one of the things that I really wanted to bring out in this episode is, stop, look around, go up to City College and look around that campus. The reason why I'm saying this is the Gargoyles and Grotesques. And, people are like, well, I've heard of Gargoyles. What are Grotesques? And, ultimately there was a movie scout that came out and he actually called the City College campus, which is also known in a lot of TV shows as the fictional Hudson University. And, but he had called it Hogwarts in Manhattan. Because it's got this very Gothic kind of feel to it. And you're always being watched by these Gargoyles and Grotesques. Cue the Michael Jackson music as somebody's watching me. But I'm not going to sing. I'm a terrible singer. In fact,
come on, Adam. Belt one out.
People will pay me to shut up. So, but the Gargoyles and Grotesques, have very similar look and appearance. The difference is the gargoyles are actually meant to be functional as like water spouts, pulling water away from the building. And I don't know French, so I don't want to kind of butcher this, but I know that gargoyle came from a French word and ultimately translates into gargling, which is the accurate kind of sound that you'll hear from these active water spouts as gargoyles. So they're gargling.
An onomatopoeia, if you will.
Yes, an onomatopoeia. Sounds like. So, the gargoyles are functional while the grotesques are not. The grotesques are purely decorative stone carvings, typically shaped like the heads of strange and ugly creatures. The City College, and I guess the reason why this movie scout said, this is like Hogwarts in Manhattan is because there's more than 1,000 gargoyles and grotesques, within the buildings of City College. So it's absolutely spectacular, and each one is uniquely carved. Now, over the years, these things had degraded, and City College now has almost like a working graveyard of some of the old ones, and what they've since done is they've tried to restore them, remodel them, and now they actually have models should they need to recreate it, and they actually have this out there's almost they have a mini graveyard of some of these lying out on the lawns. They also have the master models that are actually in the Great Hall that are stored in that building. There's also supposedly tunnels that I have never seen in City College that does connect within that network. That's pretty much, I think, shut down to the public for the most part, but there are tunnels much like what you see at Columbia. So each one of these, it's the largest concentration of gargoyles and grotesques in the nation. And, I believe the mass majority of the designs, they're the grotesques. Though obviously there are some gargoyles. The college has I already mentioned, the gargoyle graveyard. The original 4 buildings on the campus were built in 1906, which were Baskerville Hall, Compton Hall, Wingate Hall, and Harris Hall. Just wanted you to be aware that each building has creatures and figures specific to the original function of the building. Wingate has the original location of the campus gym, and many of those figures on Wingate are in various acrobatic poses as a result. Some are goofy, such as a man holding a shield with his mouth agape and his tongue sticking out with strange facial expressions. Another is laughing and also holding a shield. Many are just men staring at you, or an owl holding a book staring at you. Some are demon-like sculptures, winged creatures with menacing stares. Some are laborers, one with a hand drill, one with a wrench, another with a hammer and an anvil. There's even some that are that we're guessing or speculation are are sculptures of professors, one with glasses carrying a book in each arm, another holding a compass, holding a parchment with geometric figures.
Interesting.
There's musicians, there's sciences type characters, holding a magnifying glass, looking at a butterfly, and one with a mortise and pedestal. And of course, then there's, the arts, all representing areas that the college specializes in, holding a brush and an hourglass. There's roughly around 600 of the 1,000 sculptures are in the first 4 original buildings. City College has obviously since expanded, but there are additional 400 or so out there. So I don't want to reveal too much. I'm just encouraging everyone to go out there and check it out. And just as a little bonus material, Shepherd Hall, which is one of the original 4 buildings, it's got a large brass bust of Abraham Lincoln. This is the actual reference model used to carve Lincoln's face into Mount Rushmore.
Fascinating.
And the piece was donated to City College by the original sculptor, Gudzone Borglum. I don't know if I butchered his name or not.
Close enough.
I hope his family forgives me, but he was the original sculptor around Rushmore. And, as is common culture, within the university, is that Lincoln's nose is incredibly shiny, polished over the decades by students, rubbing his nose for good luck. Never pick his nose. Never pick his nose. But you can always rub his nose for good luck.
You can pick your friends and you can pick your enemies, but you can't pick your friend's nose.
Yeah. Not if you want to remain friends.
That's right.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Harlem Stories. We hope to bring you great content and so much more over the years. So thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.